let's talk a bit about potatoes, because that's another one that I get a lot of questions about. And I brought two up here to show you. This is a bag of Kennebec, which is just kind of a wonderful, like, roasting potato. Been around forever. Really great white potato. And then I brought up a sweet potato here, and they're actually, we kind of do things differently with these two. So we'll start with the regular potatoes, and then we'll talk a bit about the sweet potatoes. So with the Kennebec potato here, this is, you're going to see it's called right here, it says seed potatoes. So a seed potato has little eyes on it. In fact, I'll just open this up. I can re-staple this bag shut because all it is a staple that keeps it closed. So I'm going to grab this potato out of here, and you can see it's a little, looks like a pretty traditional potato, but it's got all of these little eyes on here that are starting to sprout a little bit. And what we're going to do with a potato like this is, in the seed potatoes, is we're going to cut this apart into little cubes that are roughly 3/4 to 1 inch square, and have at least 1 or 2, some people will say 2 or 3 eyes on your section that you're cutting off. So you can just take a good, sharp, very clean knife. It's important that your knife is clean, and you're going to cut this into sections. So a potato this size, I may slice here, and then down the middle. So I'm going to end up with 6 sections, most likely. But again, you need to kind of find those eyes. And then I'm going to leave it sit out for about 24 hours. 24 to 48 is fine. But what you're doing there is you're letting that cut end, where that fresh cut is, you're going to let that callus over. If you were to cut it and plant it right away, the kind of the skin there of the potato, or the interior part of the potato, it's going to allow the bad types of fungus and bacteria to potentially get in and can cause some rotting and disease issues. So we want to let that callus over. It's almost like a wound on our body. We want that to scab over before we introduce it to, the elements or whatever. So that's what we do with a seed potato, and then they can go out to the garden. Now, planting potatoes is very similar to planting, the methods anyway, are very similar to what I had mentioned about asparagus. So you're basically going to dig a trough, again about 6 or 8 inches deep. You're going to put your potato sections, those little eyes that you cut off, you're going to put those in there. Again, space them out about 2-ish feet between your cuttings, and you're going to put a couple inches of soil over the top of that. And you're going to let that grow, and when it's up about 6 inches, you're going to add a couple more inches of soil. And you're going to keep going until not only your little trough is full, but you can keep going until you have basically a bit of a mound over the surface. And what you're doing is every time you put that soil over there, the plant is going to start to create more or less another potato in that area. So what you'll find, if you've never harvested potatoes before, it's completely different than, say, an onion, where you have one plant that you planted and you get one onion. On a potato plant, there's going to be potatoes. These little tubers are going to be all over the root system, and so they might be at various levels. That's why we're going to continue to add that soil to cover the plant as you go up, as you're building that mound up. That way you can harvest some potatoes off of the top while the plant is still green. We call those new potatoes. Or you can harvest old potatoes or regular potatoes after the top has kind of died and dried out for a couple of weeks, and you can harvest those regular, your regular potatoes. So if you're going to do potatoes in a container, it's doable, but it's very difficult because you do need a very deep container. There are various methods online. Actually, some of them are very, very, I would say, ingenious. I've seen a couple different methods using like very large garbage cans, where you take one garbage can and set it inside of another garbage can, typically like a plastic tub of some kind, plastic waste container. And you can actually cut some holes in the side of the container, inside the inner, we'll call it the liner. What it does is it gives you the ability to lift that up and actually harvest a couple potatoes out of those like windows that you've cut in the side of the container. and then you can set that back down in there. So you can harvest some potatoes earlier in the season without disturbing the entire plant or digging the entire plant up. So kind of cool. There are some pots out there that are specifically designed for growing potatoes. Potatoes definitely grow best in the ground. They really do. But some of the different things that you find online with, box contraptions with windows that you can open up, all of those things work if you want to put that kind of effort into it. Like I said, some of those I've seen are really very cool, and they do work. So, but there's no substitute for just planting them in the ground. It always works really well. Potatoes also need a good balanced fertilizer when you plant them. The garden food or garden tone either of those would work really well. The other thing that I was going to mention about potatoes and asparagus both is it's a really good idea, and this is actually honestly true of virtually all garden plants. Trying to keep your rows or your beds weed-free is really important. Weeds are going to be, obviously, are always an issue around here, but as they're growing, they're taking nutrients, water, all of that stuff away from your plant. So if the weeds grow too much and compete too much with your plant, you're going to have very small potatoes or very poor production on the side of the asparagus, things like that. Same is going to be true of onions. We're going to talk about onions next.